Good afternoon and welcome to this TOPdesk webinar, Events in the Web. My name is Martijn van der Bovenkamp and I'm one of the consultants at TOPdesk. Before we continue, I would like to go through some of the basics for this webinar. You can use the panel on the right-hand side to ask us questions throughout the webinar, and my colleagues will be more than happy to help you with any questions you might have. Please make sure you collapse the panel on the right-hand side if you're not asking questions, as it will cover some of the functionalities being shown in the demo. We will answer any questions out loud to the group for everyone to benefit from, if we have time, at the end of the webinar. And we always follow up via email if we don't have time to answer your question. So if you need to leave before the end of the webinar, we will get back to you. In the next 40 minutes or so, I will talk you through a new functionality called Events in the Web. And the goals of this webinar is to make you better understand how events are used in TOPdesk, as well as explain the relationship between events and actions. The ultimate goal of this webinar is that you'll be able to create basic events yourself. Now, this webinar is intended for TOPdesk application managers or for people with a similar level of TOPdesk experience. But as I mentioned before, if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the panel on the right-hand side and we'll be happy to answer your question. The program for the webinar is as follows. We'll kick off with a short introduction of what it is, what is new, what exactly is new, followed by what are events and actions in TOPdesk. I'll give some theoretical examples of event and actions, followed by a demonstration in a TOPdesk environment. I'll wrap up the session with a brief overview of the implications, as well as a summary of the things that we've learned. To start with, events or event management is not a completely new concept in TOPdesk. Depending on if you are an on-premises customer or a SaaS customer, you might have already seen events in the system, probably when the TOPdesk consultant came on board. The thing that has changed is the way you access events in the system. It is now possible to access event or event management via TOPdesk. You'll find the module under Modules, Action Management, and the Event Explorer. Once again, this functionality has now been introduced to our SaaS customer. Our on-premises customers are already using and creating events via the so-called dedicated clients manager. So what are events and actions exactly? Just to refresh your memory. I've come up with the following scenario, which you'll probably have in your organization as well. So let's say you want to notify the caller when his or her call is registered. If we analyze this scenario and think about kind of the event that this will start with, then the registration of a new call is in this case the event, and the notification of the caller is the email action. If we look at another example, let's say we want to notify the caller when more information is needed. The event, in this case in TOPdesk, would be, for example, the change of the status of a call, let's say from active to pending user or waiting for user, and the email action linked to it could be an email asking the user to provide more information. So what we can see, what we can learn from these scenarios are that events are predefined moments in TOPdesk, and you can design these moments and thus these events yourself. Actions are processes that are carried out by TOPdesk as the result of one or more events. This effectively means that you can set up a workflow by linking an event and an action, and this is what we're going to explore in this webinar. In the next slide, we're going to have a closer look at linking of event and actions in TOPdesk. So here we can see kind of a very basic scenario. So we've got an event and we've got an action as well. For example, the call registration. So the event is a new call being registered in the system, and the action is the email notification being sent off to the caller, notifying them that the call has been registered. I just want to briefly explain kind of specific relationships that you can create in TOPdesk. So the example I just gave was a one-to-one relationship. So there's one event linked to one action. However, it's also possible to create a one-to-many relationship. For example, if you want to notify as well, if you want to notify the caller as well as the operator whenever a new call has been created, then you can set this up. So the event, once again, is the registration of a new call, and the action, in this case, two actions, one email notifying the caller, and the other email notifying the operator. There's another option available, that's the many-to-one relationship. So let's say there's a specific notification that you set up to notify your operators that a call has been assigned to them. Now, as you might know, TOPdesk works throughout different modules and throughout different cards. So you might have an event for, let's say, a first-line card and a second-line call card. So these are two events. So you can have two events, and you can link the event to the same action, so you don't have to create an action for each and every card in this instance. If we have a close look at what kind of actions we can create, the one that we've discussed already is the email action. So something happens in TOPdesk and an email goes out to either the caller, the operator, the supplier, management, etc. However, it's also possible to create an HTTP action. Now, you might already have HTTP actions in your system, but think of them as automated tasks normally performed by an operator, such as changing the status from completed to closed. Another example or another action that you can apply is the log action. So you're probably familiar with the audit trail functionality in TOPdesk, which logs basic information about any kind of adjustments or changes made to a call. For instance, if the operator group is changed from operator group A to operator group B, that information is typically logged or can be logged in the audit trail. However, if you have a very specific kind of requirement of logging information, so information that changed on the card, then you can create a custom log in the system. So on the next slide, we're going to have a look at some of these examples. So we're going to have a look at email, HTTP, and log actions and what they can actually do. So let's have a look at example 1. I've already mentioned that before, but let's go over it quickly. So let's say you want to inform your operator whenever an incident has been assigned to him or to her. So in this case, the event is the editing of the cards when the operator field is changed from operator A to operator B. The email action will then inform or notify the operator by sending them an email that a call has been assigned to them. Example 2 is an HTTP action example. So let's say you want to automatically close an incident 7 days after the completion date. This is possible to set up in TOPdesk by creating an event that monitors whenever the completion date has been set and activates 7 days after that completion date. The action then is to automatically change the status from completed to closed. Example 3 is a log action example. So let's say you want to create a custom log whenever the serial number of one of your assets has been changed. The event in this case is again the card being edited by one of your operators and the serial number is being changed. We can link an action to this event whereby we register, for instance, the old serial number, the new serial number, the current date and time, and the operator name. I hope you now have a better understanding of the theoretical side of events and actions in TOPdesk, and I want to take you through a brief demonstration of a real environment in TOPdesk. So in this demo, I will explain where to find the new events management section and how to create events yourself. Some of you might find the examples complex, but remember, you can always ask questions via the panel on the right-hand side, and my colleagues will be more than happy to answer these questions. I'm going to click on the operator section, and we're going to log in to my local environment. For now, I'll just use the administrator account to gain access to TOPdesk. Now, before I show you where you can find the new functionality, it is important to know that with the new events management section in TOPdesk, some adjustments have been made to the permission group in TOPdesk. So that means that you now need to define if someone can actually create or view events in the system. So let's have a look at where you can find this. So we're going to modules, then we're going to supporting files, permission groups, and I'm going to open up a random permission group. Now, if you scroll all the way down, then you'll find the section Event and Actions. Now, this section is not new per se, because email actions, HTTP actions, and log actions have always been there. The part that's been added is the events action. So typically, if you are either an administrator on an on-premises installation, or you are a supervisor SaaS user on a SaaS environment, then our support team will have granted you the event permission, so you will be able to access the module already. However, if you have custom permission groups for maybe a subset of application managers and you want them to access the new Event Explorer, then you'll need to amend their permission group and grant them the appropriate rights before they can start working with the module. I will now go back to the main menu of TOPdesk, or the module overview, and we're going to have a look at the actual new functionalities. So you'll find the Event Explorer under Modules, where we are now, Action Management, and you should have access now, if the permission group have been set up accordingly, to the Event Explorer. So let's have a look. The first thing that you'll notice is that there are already quite a few events in the system, and as mentioned earlier, this is due to the fact that the functionality itself is not new, so events have been with us for a very long time. The thing that has changed, that as a SaaS customer, you now have access or visibility to the events in the system. You can amend these events, and you can also create new events if you want. What you notice as well is that the setup is quite similar to that of Action Management. So on the left-hand side, you'll find the Explorer, so it displays kind of the modules within the system, and on the right-hand side, you can see the different events per module. What we're going to do next is we're going to have a closer look at one of the events in the system, and I just want to talk you through what we're looking at and what kind of the functionality entails for these events. So we're going to have a look at an example here. It's called 1 hour until the deadline is breached. So I'm going to double click this event, and this opens the specific event. So let's start on the left-hand side. There is some basic information which you're quite used to, I think. So there's the name of the event. So don't worry that your caller might see this information, because that's not the case. This information is just visible for you as an application manager. The next section is where you can define if this event is active, yes or no, followed by the type of event. Now this is a bit more tricky. I'm just going to open up the drop-down list to see what kind of type of events we can create. I'm just going to go through them one by one. So the event we're looking at this time is the card date event, which means that the event we create looks at specific date fields in TOPdesk. So in this example, it looks at the target date. However, there are more fields or other fields available, for instance, the call date, the closure date, the on-hold date, etc. So whenever you want to create an event based on any kind of time constraint or a date, then you're probably best off by choosing the card date event type. The new card type event can be used whenever a new card, for instance a new call, is created either via the self-service desk or via the operator section. So the card does not exist just yet, it's created, it's saved, and that counts as a new card event. There's also the option to go for an edit card, which is one that's used quite a lot, and that typically means that kind of any information is changed on the card. For instance, the operator name is changed, or the target date is changed. So whenever information is changed on the card, you'll need to go for the edit card. Now the delete card is not commonly used because we do not recommend deleting information in TOPdesk, but let's say you want to be notified that a first line call or whichever kind of card within TOPdesk is deleted, then you can go for the delete card type event. What remains are the move to this card type and move from this card type, which means that you move from one kind of specific card type to another. For example, if you want an event that monitors whenever you move from a first line incident to a second line incident, then you can use one of these types to register it. Or if you want to be notified that specific card is archived, so it then actually moves kind of the card type from first line call type to an archive one, then you can use one of these two options. For now, I'll just set it back to card date to make sure that this event works as designed. What follows is some room for the description. Now, I normally recommend filling in a description. I know it's a bit tedious sometimes, but your colleagues will thank you when kind of a good description is there, so that you actually know, your colleague knows what this event does and can make adjustments or troubleshoot if there are any issues with this specific event. Now, on the right-hand side, this is where things get slightly more complicated. This is where we can define the conditions. So remember, we're looking at an event. There's 1 hour until the deadline is breached. So the only thing this card really does is that it looks at the target date, and 60 minutes before the target date breaches, this will typically notify the operator and tell them that immediate action is necessary. However, in this case, we might want to set a condition, because imagine the following: what if your operator completes the call, closes the call, let's say 3 hours before the target date? If you do not set any condition, then this event will occur because the only thing it looks at is the target date, and 60 minutes before the target date it will trigger and notify the operator that they need to do something. So that's not right. So in this case, we need to set a specific condition, and that is visible on the top section here. So this event only occurs when the close condition is false, which makes sense, because otherwise when the call is closed and the target date is breached, it will notify the operator, because that's not necessary, because the call has been resolved already. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind is that you can set one or more conditions, and on the right hand side you can specify the AND and the OR condition. So if you go for the AND condition, if you have multiple conditions, then all these conditions need to be met, otherwise the event will not trigger. If you select the OR condition, then you're basically saying, I don't really care which of these conditions is going to be true, is going to be met. Just one of them need to be met, and then this event can happen. So you also need to determine kind of your conditions that you want to set for this specific event. Let's say if you're working with the completed as well as the closed status to kind of process your incidents, then you might want to add an extra condition here that this event will not be triggered whenever the condition, let's say the closed is false, but also completed is false. Otherwise, it will also send a reminder to the operator when you've selected the completed state. The first field I haven't discussed just yet is the event occurs when, or the suppress event when. Now, I normally recommend to go for the event occurs when, because this is where you're in control of determining whenever this event needs to happen. If you use the suppress functionality, then you'll need to think of kind of every exception that can happen that you want to exclude. So if I change that, for instance, if I want to go for the suppress event when, then this event needs to suppress when the close condition is true in this instance. So everything becomes quite the opposite. But like I've mentioned before, I recommend going for the event occurs when, because you're then in control of setting the conditions yourself. And it only triggers when these conditions are met and not the other way around. One thing that's left on the left-hand side, we're looking at the linked actions. So remember, we have an event and we can link an action to it. So the event that's linked to this, the action that is linked to this event is the email notification going to the operator to notify them that 1 hour until the deadline is breached. And one new functionality as well, which hopefully helps you a bit, is the ability to actually click on the action, which brings you to the action as well. So you can see this is just an example I've created of the mail that will be sent to the operator whenever the call is about to breach. For now, I'm going to close this event. What we're going to do next is we're going to create an event ourselves. We're going to create 2 events. So we'll start off quite easy with a simple event, and then we'll create another one which is a bit more complex. So I'm back at the Event Explorer, and I'm going to create a new event by clicking on Create a New Event on the right-hand side. Similar to Action Management, I now need to define which module and which card I would like to create this event for. In this case, I'm happy to go for call management and a first-line call, so that's fine. So I click on Create a New Event. The same screen pops up. But we're now in control. We need to specify what this event actually does. And what we're going to do is we're going to use one of the examples I explained or used in the presentation, and that's we're going to create an event that monitors whenever the operator is changed on an incident. So we're going to give this a name. Let's keep it simple. We're going to go for operator as changed. I wouldn't activate this just yet, just because if I click on active, then it becomes active immediately. So what I normally recommend is design your event, think it through, make sure that it is correct, and then after you made sure it's correct, you can activate the event. So this is what we'll do here as well. The next step after filling in the name is to determine what kind of type of event this is. So this is where you typically need to ask yourself, all right, is this about a new card? Is this maybe about any kind of card data, deletion of a card, etc.? In this case, of course, it's editing, changing of the operator on a first-line call. So we're going to select the edit card option. While I've clicked that, you can see that on the right-hand side, the edit specification becomes active. So that means that I can actually determine, all right, in which fields am I interested in monitoring for this specific event. So I'm going to apply this specification, and the field that I'm interested in is the operator field, of course. So I'll open up the drop-down list, and this gives me access to kind of each and every field that you come across in a typical incident. So we're going to locate the operator field, and after you've selected that, you can actually determine or specify if you want to look at a specific old value or a new value, if that's necessary. So what that means is, if I open up the drop-down list, is that you can say, all right, whenever the operator changes from, let's say, Mrs. Barnes to a new value, let's say Joe Bloggs, then this event becomes true. So this is a very, very specific event that you create for a very specific change between operators. It's not what I recommend, but it is possible in the system. In this case, we're not going to do this because the only thing we want is an event that just monitors whenever the operator field has been changed on a first line card. So I'm almost happy with my event. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to link the action. So the only thing we've done now is create an event which monitors for a change on the operator field, and we're going to link an action with it. And this morning I already created an email action to notify the operator that a call has been assigned to them. So by clicking on the little pen, you can edit the actions. You can see an overview of the actions already available in my test environment. And by just ticking the box for the operator, I can activate the email action. And as mentioned earlier in the presentation, with the relationship between events and actions, you can actually select multiple email actions if that's necessary. Of course, these don't make sense, but you do have that option. So I'm now happy with this event, so I can set that to active. I can save my event, clicking on the right-hand side, and this is my event with the linked action now active in the system. We're going back to the Event Explorer, and we are going to create another event, a bit more complex this time. So on the right-hand side, we're going to create on a new event. Again, I'm just going to stick with first line call within call management, so that's fine. I'll click on create a new event. What we want to do now is, let's say you've asked the caller nicely for some additional information, but the user hasn't come back to you, so you want to remind the user again. You want to remind the user to contact the service desk or go to the self-service portal and provide the information that you need. So we're going to set up a reminder event to kind of detect that change in the system. So let's start again with the name. So I'm just going to call it remind caller or reminder. I'm going to fill that in for the description as well. Now, the thing we need to determine is what kind of type of event we can we're going to use here. Now, the event that we're going to create in this case is using the on hold date in the system. So that's a date field. So the type of event that we're going to create is the card date event. Next, we need to determine what kind of field it is that we want to monitor for. In this case, that is the on hold date. So we're going to say, all right, 1 day after the on hold date has been activated, we want to notify or remind the caller that they still need to contact the service desk. So in this case, we're going to select fill in this information. So it's going to be 1 day. And we need to change the value from before to after, of course. So 1 day after the on hold date, we want to notify the caller. Let's click on save in the meantime. So Typically, in a normal a normal environment, you'll probably have different statuses to determine whether you're waiting for a user, you're waiting for a supplier, etc. And depending on kind of your configuration of TOPdesk, that will typically trigger or activate the on hold date. However, what happens now if I were to link a specific action to this event? Let's say you're also using the waiting for supplier status, which puts the call on hold as well. That will mean that whenever the call is put on hold, it will trigger an email and ask the caller to update or remind the caller to update their call. So what we want in this case is we want a condition, so an exception to this event, and that is the condition that this event only happens when the status waiting for user, a pending user, has been selected. So this is exactly what we're going to set up. So we're going to apply, activate the condition, and we're going to locate the status field in the drop-down list here. So status equals, and then we're going to look for the value, and depending on your TOPdesk configuration, this can be any kind of value, but in my environment, this is called waiting for a response. So this means that the operator has changed the call and is waiting for a response for the user, but hasn't received it just yet. There's one thing I need to change. As you can see, the default value is the suppress when value, and that's not necessarily what I want in this case. So I'm going to change this to event occurs when. So the event, just to summarize what we're looking at, is a card date event which monitors the on hold date and becomes active 1 day after the on hold date, but only when the status equals waiting for a response. The last step, which we'll need to do, is to link the specific action, which is the reminder for the user, that they still need to contact the service desk or update their call via the self-service portal. Now in this case, I've just selected the caller clarification needed, but you can also create a specific email that really says, reminder, please contact the service desk as soon as possible. That's up to you, of course, but for this example, I'm just going to link the clarification needed. Again, check all the conditions, and if you're happy with the conditions, you can activate the event by making the active button enabled and save the event. We've now seen how to create events in TOPdesk. I would like to make you aware of several implications related to the introduction of events in the web, and for this I will return to the presentation. The current procedure, since you do not yet have access, or in the past you didn't have access to the creation of events, was that you could contact our support team whenever a new request or new event was necessary. That will still be the case. However, this will become a paid service in the near future. When that will happen, of course, you will receive a notification from our support team to let you know that that has now become a paid service. But please bear in mind that you will be responsible for creating and amending events in the near future. However, of course, support will continue to answer your questions regarding events and actions. So you can always send them an email or give them a call if you need some advice or you're stuck with creating a specific event or linking it to a specific action. One thing I would like to stress out is that you'll need to extensively test any adjustments you made to the events, and I strongly recommend making any adjustments to events in your test environment first, so that you can make sure that kind of any existing workflows will remain to work whenever you've made these adjustments. So what have we learned during this webinar? we now know that events are predefined moments in TOPdesk, and that it is possible to link events with an action and effectively creating a workflow. An action can be an email action, an HTTP action, or a log action. You can access this module via Action Management, and again, please bear in mind that if you can't see the module, then it's probably due to a permission not just being there in the permission group, so you need to amend the permission. And also, please be aware that our on-premises customers will still be using the dedicated client until they've upgraded to the latest kind of version of event management, but also when that becomes available, you will be notified to let you know that the event management is now kind of available in under Action Management. And again, please be very careful when working with events in TOPdesk, as you can damage kind of current workflows in the system. So always create events in your test environment, extensively test them, and then replicate them to your live environment when it's safe to do so. Also, there's more information available on our help, so help.topdesk.com. There's a specific section available for events management. It's quite a good manual where you can read through kind of the different types, different events that you can set up, as well as some examples which you can use while setting up or kind of exploring this new functionality in TOPdesk. So this concludes our webinar. Please stick around if you have any questions. Otherwise, I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope you join us again.